Okay, the final part in Chapter 14 goes into breaking down our variance a little bit farther than what we saw in 6, 7, and 8. So recall what we've looked at thus far is that we would have put together a master static budget for the period based on expected unit sales, how many we're going to sell at a specific price each. We would, of course, have multiple products most likely, so we would have a sales mix, for example, of product A and product B. We would have different prices for different products most likely. Each one of those products would have standard cost in regards to making those items. We would have standard labor hours that we would expect, etc. And those are the things that we use to put not only the master static budget together, but when we have performed for the period, we can then take those standards and multiply them times the actual quantity of units sold for the period and make what's called the flexible budget column. The actual results column was based off of actual quantity, actual selling prices, actual cost for the inputs, etc. Now, we learned how to do variances between the master static budget and the flexible budget, and we learned how to do variances between the flexible budget and the actual results. We've already looked at some of these right here. We did calculate the sales volume variance back in, I believe, Chapter 7. And we saw that the sales volume variance is just the difference between a flexible budget amount and the corresponding static budget amount. Okay, so again, between the flexible budget amount and the master static budget amount gives us the sales volume variance. That was calculated by subtracting the static budget units from the actual units sold, and then multiplying that number, that quantity or volume difference, and multiplying it times the contribution margin, because the revenue dollars used on the master static budget side and the flexible budget side were the same, and the variable cost, etc., would be the same, and the fixed cost would be the same. So we can literally use contribution margin. You guys know that that's revenues minus variable cost equals contribution margin. So we can use contribution margin times the quantity in order to just calculate the sales volume variance. Now, we can take and get a greater understanding of the sales volume variance by breaking it down into the sales mix variance and the sales quantity variance. Alright, so the sales mix variance is the difference between the budgeted contribution margin for the actual sales mix and the budgeted contribution margin for the budgeted sales mix. Okay, so we can literally take and say actual sales mix minus budgeted sales mix times budgeted contribution margin per unit and calculate the sales mix variance. The sales mix variance is best understood in terms of a composite unit, which is a hypothetical unit with weights based on the mix of individual units. Alright, so again, we're going to have more than one product kind of thing. A favorable sales mix variance would arise when the actual sales mix shifts toward the products having the largest contribution margin. And what about vice versa? An unfavorable sales mix variance would arise if the actual sales mix shifts towards the products with the lowest contribution margin. The sales quantity variance is the other part of breaking down the sales volume variance. And the sales quantity variance, right here, is the difference between the budgeted contribution margin based on actual units sold of all products at the budgeted sales mix and the contribution margin in the static budget. The sales quantity variance arises because the number of units sold varies from the budget. Now, a favorable sales quantity variance would indicate that the actual number of all products sold exceeds the budgeted units of all units sold. So therefore, what's the opposite of that? An unfavorable sales quantity variance would indicate that the actual number of all products sold was less than the budgeted units of all units sold. What is the formula for the sales quantity variance? We can take the actual units of all products sold and subtract the budgeted units of all products sold and get a number, and then take that number and multiply it times the budgeted sales mix percentage and multiply that times the budgeted contribution margin per unit. And I do have these formulas put on several of the next slides for you, but I wanted to make sure that you saw that illustration that I put together for you. Again, we could put it into levels, and again what we're seeing is that the sales volume variance was level 2. It can be broken down into the third level, the sales mix variance and the sales quantity variance. And in the appendix or back end of chapter 14, we can even take the sales quantity variance and break it down even farther into the market share variance and the market size variance, which again, I do have this plotted out for you here. Sales quantity variance. Why would we have a quantity variance? Well, apparently we were off on some estimations, right? Our percentage share of the market could be different, and we could have a different size market. Okay, so these two components together is why sales quantity variance comes to light. So I did put some of these formulas in here for you. However, I wanted you to make sure that you look in the text, in the 15th edition text. Market share variance and market size variance are shown on pages 574 and 575. But here are the formulas for the sales mix variance and the sales quantity variance. Again, the sales quantity variance is the one that can be broken down farther. Go to pages 574 and 575 to take the sales quantity variance into the market share and market size variance. If you plan to take the CMA exam, I can assure you that these variances are something that you guys are going to have to know how to calculate on your own. Alright, so here's market share variance formula. We're going to take our actual market size in units. Again, that's the actual market size. And we're going to multiply that times a number that is based on calculating what is our actual market share versus what did we budget for our market share. Right, so market share variance, we're looking at the difference between what we budgeted and what our actual market share was. And we can then multiply that number times our budgeted contribution margin per unit based on our budget information, and we would be able to come up with a number. if our budgeted market share was higher than our actual market share, then we're going to have an unfavorable variance, right? All right, so vice versa, what would we have? How could we have a favorable market share variance? Our actual market share was greater than our budgeted market share. Here's the formula for market size variance. Again, we're looking at the size. That is what we are looking for the difference in. All right, so actual market size minus budgeted market size. And we're doing that in units. We would calculate that and then multiply it times our budgeted market share, and then multiply it times that budgeted contribution margin per composite unit for our budgeted mix, and we would get our market size variance. All right, so if the actual market size was larger than our budgeted market size, then we would end up having a favorable market size variance. Vice versa, what if our actual market size was smaller than our budgeted market size? Then we would have an unfavorable market size variance. I included the additional slides that are shown for you guys in the text, showing you the formulas and the use of them with the data set that's given in the text. For our particular company, they had a budgeted market share of 20%. Actual market share, however, was only 18.75%. Budgeted contribution margin per composite unit was $245. And actual market size was 800,000 units, but the budgeted market size was 775,000 units. And this information can be plotted out and calculated in order to get these variances. So I did leave these in here from the text, that if you wanted to look at them again, you could just plug those numbers in the formulas and calculate it.